The Greatsword is a greatsword and functions like a greatsword. With the greatsword, you use greatsword attacks that are pretty great using your sword that deals great damage thanks to the sword that happens to be great, but what's not so great is actually nothing. It's all great. Everything is great. The sword, great. The damage, great. The stagger, great. When you hear the words Hyper-Autistic Greatsword Simulator, your first response is probably, oh yeah, fucking Monster Hunter, isn't it? And while not incorrect, it isn't the game I'm talking about today. In the first Berserker Khazan, you play as Khazan, the first man to ever get angry. But not only that, a ghost inflicts a terrible curse upon him. He collects souls as currency, loses them upon death, and respawns at an arbitrary checkpoint system. Oh god. They turned my life into a soulslike. I wish they just let me die in that avalanche. That was my Ben Starr impression. Did you think it was good? I thought it was pretty good. As the world's first angry man, it's only natural that he can smack things, and our smacker of choice is obviously the Greatsword. In video games, Greatswords love being comically slow bonk sticks, even though a real-life Zweihander is generally around 2 to 4 kilograms, or 4 to 8 pounds for those still using fictional units of measurement. Basically, they're very lightweight. Khazan seems to be one of the few games to agree with this notion, because the Greatsword here can reach absurdly fast swing speeds. After beating the game on Expert, you unlock Hardcore mode, which makes the following changes. No Phantom Form. I basically never use Phantom Form. No Spirit of Advocacy. That's a summon you can use to help with boss fights. I never use that either. Attribute changes are disabled. Mid-level strength. Enemy health and stamina aren't displayed. This might actually be of benefit because I start getting impatient and sometimes even choke when a boss's health is low. As for modified lock-on, the game typically looks like this, zoomed out but keeping you focused on the enemy. On Hardcore, it zooms right in for this over-the-shoulder look. This is so weird. I don't know how I feel about this camera. Like, I was able to tolerate it with smaller enemies, but like, a big guy like this? I don't know. Can you just zoom out a little bit, bro? Like, damn. This will definitely take the longest to get used to, more so than no enemy health and stamina bars. Finally, we have to start on a fresh save to access Hardcore, so no handy New Game Plus features for us. Starting from scratch is really rough once you've gotten used to all the late game perks, but something builds character. So are these all the changes made in Hardcore mode? No. The game just doesn't tell you about some of the most important changes it makes. I had to scroll through months of patch notes to find this info. Greater penalty upon failing reflection. Our attack damage is actually increased, which is interesting. Brutal attack damage is increased, except not anymore, they rolled that back. Less stamina and defense. Okay, that one makes sense. We'll see how these changes affect gameplay, as I intend on running through Hardcore mode with only Greatsword.
Give us your body, Khazan, with your broad shoulders, rippling muscles, chiseled jawline, golden locks, and defined abs, forged from the finest steel in the hottest of hellfires. You will make a fine addition to our polycule.
Sorry, Phantom. I only do situationships.
Let us go to your body.
Blade Phantom begins slow walking towards us. In other words, we are fucked. However, now's a good time to explain how this weapon works. Greatswords focus on two things, charging and parrying. It's all about reducing your charge time as much as physically possible through not just perk points, but correctly chaining your combos. For example, after charging my sprint attack, I can charge X, then follow up with a charge Y, either resetting with another charge X or a skill, which can also be charged. By following up your charges after an action, the speed is increased, letting you swing really fast. Certain skills also give you a temporary charge speed buff after casting. Once you've unlocked all your inputs, it's about alternating your attacks to quickly chain charges and apply pressure on the enemy. But when you don't have that momentum, you'll need to find an opening to create one. Most games give you 1 or 2 parries and call it a day, but Khazan felt the need to give Greatsword 4, maybe 5, possibly 6 different options. It depends on how much you stretch the definition of a parry. Anyway, you've got your guard and your brink guard. Every weapon has this, is incredibly responsive, letting you easily chain guards during an enemy's longer, faster combos. This is your safe option and applicable in basically every scenario. You can even follow up with X for a super quick double slash that chains into more charge combos. The second universal parry is Reflection, LB plus Y. Get the perk that reduces the start lag as soon as possible, because while the hardest parry to execute, it's stupid strong once you figure it out. The key to timing it is lining up the swing of the sword with the swing of the enemy's weapon, basically like a deflect. If you land it, it staggers hard and deals a fuckload of stamina damage, along with interrupting the enemy's animations. You'll even get a perk later on that increases its active parry frames, making it incredibly consistent, potentially shutting down some bosses once you nail it. The final universal parry is Counterattack, LB plus B, and is only for specific scenarios called burst attacks. These are super telegraphed, but rather than dodging, you want to use LB plus B to parry it. Doing so staggers the enemy, but also fully restores your stamina, giving you a window to pop off. Greatsword has a unique parry of its own as a skill called Counter Strike. It kind of functions like a standard guard, but it can also be charged. It's very satisfying to pull off against massive attacks. In the early game, it's rarely worth using this parry over your regular guard input, but after getting all the perks, its value skyrockets. This final perk lets you use Counter-Strike even if you're in the middle of these attack animations. This is pretty much every single attack in the standard Greatsword combo, so you can go nuts wailing on a guy, press Counter-Strike just before they hit you, and keep going. Warcry is a defense skill, but if you take damage during the casting animation, the buffs are increased. So if you use it like a parry, it gets stronger, but it's not really a parry. Then there's Phantom Night Veil, which I wouldn't call a parry either. However, if you get staggered mid-animation, Blade Phantom will perform a counterattack on your behalf, really stretching the definition of parry with those last two skills, but the initial four is still quite expansive. Thanks to my prior experience with the game, bosses feel familiar, but the weird camera was still throwing me off. A well-timed reflection turns the tide of battle, letting me squeeze out a victory. Khazan then parries Blade Phantom with his bare hands before performing a Yaoi semi-flip.
I will have no masters.
Khazan finally agrees to join the polycule, on the condition that he is the top. The now UK Blade Phantom agrees to his deal.
As long as I get to nut in him first, I want him to strangle me with his bony Khazan. Can I please have a bucket of your sweat? Enough! I get to come in him first.
Once you kill him, you're subjected to his Twink Death second boss phase for naff jump scares. Bro's aura is obscene, and I feel like spectacle fights are rarely done well in action games, but surprisingly, Khazan of all things is an exception. Talking about Khazan, who is he exactly? This game is set in the world of Dungeon Fighter Online, a South Korean MMO that people have lots of positive feelings towards. It's a 2D beat-em-up which triggers a feral, primal, carnal response in me, so it should be to my liking, but it's, you know, an MMO. I was big on those in middle school, but now I'm 2 years off having a fully developed prefrontal cortex. They aren't my thing anymore. If you're wondering how Khazan is relevant, he's basically the origin for the Slayer class. Bro has a ripped blonde twunk inside of him and yeah, that's definitely Khazan. The female Slayer is the counterpart, but she's basically a completely different class. As a girl like her, I wanted to play the pretty silver-haired woman, but male Slayer is directly linked to Khazan, so he wins by being more related to the topic of this video. The combat is cooldown based, which I do not like. Look, if they make more single-player spin-offs like Khazan set in the Dungeon Fighter universe, then color me intrigued, but I don't want to play a cooldown based MMO with mostly negative reviews. A woman. That scared me. So after you unlock the blacksmith, you get a really epic feature where you can just pump Khazan full of like lethal doses of estrogen. So now you have the power to force femme Khazan if you want. She's not fully voice acted. She's not in any cutscenes. She has no cutscenes. She is nowhere near as ripped as Guy Khazan. The reason's obvious. They're just cowards. If Bro Khazan can be shredded, makes no sense that she isn't. They are just cowards. All of them, everything, the world.
Be me, immortal, Wendigo spirit, a being of pure hunger and hate. Some fucking dude shows up, wanting Wendigo or some shit. Fucking what? He pulls out goddamn cheerleader outfit and calls me a femboidigo.
Femboidigo is literally a parry tweaker's wet dream. Only problem is, after he ignites his nail, you take chip damage whenever you block it, although his hammer is completely fine. With fire resistance, this isn't a problem really, but that does mean you could choose to parry the hammer and dodge the fire nail if you want to avoid taking damage as much as possible. As you can tell by my gameplay though, I don't really care. Rankus has the honor of being the first boss that I outright hated. Even now, he's still a struggle, and let me show you why. Delayed attack merchant, oh my god. These attacks are so hard to read, bro. Like, you doing a fast one or you doing a slow one? I don't fucking know. No way I clutched that, oh my god. I told you, when I don't have the health bars, when the health is low I get impatient and I start making like dumb rush decisions, but when I don't have the health bar I just keep going and I don't stop until they die, and that's all I think about. Maluka clearly wants you to rhythm game Brink Guard through his attacks, but it's way easier to just go. Even this, you can just shut him up completely. While the LB plus Y parry is harder to execute than a standard perfect guard, it's still easier pulling it off on his first swing than memorizing all of this bullshit. I feel like there are two ways of mastering Maluka. You can learn the timing of every combo and flawlessly Brink Guard through all of it, or you can just reflect everything and not interact with like 50% of his moveset because you keep interrupting him.
This dude did a 10-hit combo. This dude's doing straights. Oh my god. Wow. This motherfucker is garbage.
Most importantly, we now have access to his armor. Chaos Ridden armor instantly gives you numerous buffs when you Brink Guard, as well as the unique skill Volcanic Wrath. It's super expensive, but deals pretty good damage that increases with the more buffs you have. So after just taking a few seconds to farm buffs, then using Volcanic Wrath, the damage skyrockets. Suddenly, we are jump scared by a cutscene of Khazan and Elamane walking through an area which, for once, doesn't base its entire color palette off of Dark Souls 3. Elamane is literally Khazan's top donator on Twitch. Whenever he's like, I'm just a cringe little gay boy, fuck my chudbucker life, she'll go, actually, you're epic sauce. You are gay though. Khazan is on the cusp of experiencing a moderately pleasant emotion, so obviously this means she's about to die. Elamane runs a very parry-heavy, passive playstyle. It almost felt like a mirror match. You can equip 2 pieces of Deep Shadow armor for 90% guard penetration. I don't know if it's because I'm on hardcore and there's some additional modifiers that the game also didn't tell me about, but I feel like this didn't really do anything. Rather than guard penetration, I personally prefer giving her a taste of her own medicine. LB plus Y followed by a dodge attack is really great for quickly capitalizing on the opening your parry gives you before she can put up her guard again. Unlike you, her stamina recovers quickly even when she's shielding. You're better off waiting for her to expend it with a series of attacks, then charge in to deplete the rest for a knockdown. The problem is her lightning attacks. Obviously you want to dodge instead of guard to avoid the electrocution status, but when she infuses it directly with her sword, just blocking her swings will still build up electrocution. To avoid getting tasered, you're better off LB plus Y parrying the first attack of her combo. This is basically what you do with Maluka to avoid his longer attack chains too. You can even parry her shield charge and any other melees you find moderately inconvenient. Near the end of the game, there's an optional Element rematch fight in which she's much stronger. I found it super difficult on hardcore. Now, my gear was very underleveled, but I'd still gotten through other bosses with minimal trouble. This fight, however, made me go back and farm up my gear again. Even with Deep Shadow's 90% guard penetration, you touch her shield and your stamina vanishes, then she flips you over and calls you a little bitch. Even if you don't attack her shield and wait for openings instead, a single mistimed parry will disintegrate your stamina in a single go. She bodied me so hard I nearly started crying, dude. She's so fucking mean. Despite that, I did actually like the fight. A boss can make me rage, bring me to the verge of tears, but once all is said and done, it's just, oh yeah, that was pretty good.
The great General Khazan. I never understood what Ozma saw in you. Always talking you up all the time. Very annoying. Why would he need you when he already had me?
Girl, I can promise you, bro's dick is not all that. This dialogue really baffles me because she expresses envy over Ozma's fondness towards Khazan when Ozma was literally engaged to another woman already. Shrocket doesn't mention this at all, which implies she thinks Khazan is a greater threat to her romantic pursuit than Ozma's own fiancé. There are plenty of annoying enemies and bosses, but the first to feel like a genuine personal attack was Trocker. As already established, I suffer from chronic parry slot brain rot, but Trocker's spells absolutely chunk your health even if you do parry them. Do you know what this means? I have to press the dodge button a lot. I dodged more in this fight alone than the entire game up to this point. The A button is literally caked in dust and cobwebs. Do you see what she's making me do? This is disgusting, but I will admit, once you figure out her timings, she is actually kind of fun. Afterwards, the game starts throwing more Zona projectile spam bosses at us, which means Greatsword's parry options become more limited. To make up for the inherent weakness of our weapon, we need to get good. The training room is the place in which you will conquer your fears. As you progress through the levels, chances are you'll find a fair few enemies that give you a bit of a spook. For me, these big hammer dragons were one such case. Their swings are either deceptively fast or heavily delayed, and they mix up frequently to throw you off. If you do get hit, it hurts a lot. So I went into training mode and spent about 20 minutes learning this enemy, mostly how to parry them, reading their telegraphs for which attacks are fast and which are delayed, then practicing the timing for the LB plus Y parry to interrupt their extended combos, while also dealing heavy stamina damage. It made killing these guys feel almost clinical. I went from fearing this enemy to understanding and methodically dissecting them. Literally, I split them in half. After that, I swapped over to training against other enemies that also put the fear of God in me. It's not just parry timings, you'll pick up on their movesets as you go. I scrolled through the list, discerning which mobs I struggled with, and trained until comfortable with them. It's not so much that an enemy is difficult, but more a lack of knowledge. The unknown is the scariest thing in an action game. This might be my favourite boss in the whole game. Scalpel's first phase is already pretty hard, but his second phase is even more aggressive and dangerous. It's honestly brutal having both be so difficult, were it not for one thing, you don't have to defeat Scalpel's second phase, you only need to survive. His health slowly ticks down on its own, and being proactive can end the fight faster, but he's so quick it's hard to find an opening. Getting through his first phase flawlessly gives you an obscene margin for error though. As I've progressed through hardcore mode, the one thing that stood out to me is how much it punishes mistakes compared to expert difficulty. For example, if you get hit with no stamina and enter exhaustion, it's pretty bad on expert but not the end of the world. On hardcore however, you enter exhaustion and, oh, is that your health bar? Hope you didn't need that. Once you master reflection spam on Scalpel though, it quickly turns into a one-sided beatdown.
This bitch.
Essentially, hardcore is less about boosting the overall difficulty, but upping the punishment for your mistakes, which is completely fair because even on expert, I got away with a lot more things than I should have. Scalpel isn't too bad at the start, but eventually he stands on his coffin and will enter a frenzied state if you don't interrupt him. However, you can avoid this move entirely if you just keep parrying and staggering. Not getting hit prevents his frenzy, but Greatsword is also very competent at applying pressure. Stick close to him, don't allow for any breathing room, reflect and counterattack everything you can, brink guard anything too risky. Phase 2 on hardcore mode is very rough though. On expert, you can use Phantom Form to stall for time as his health ticks down, abusing your ranged attacks, but that is straight up not an option on hardcore. He can, however, still be staggered, so by landing a reflection, you can build momentum, just make sure to avoid overextending. His moveset is almost identical to phase 1, so parry the attacks you're familiar with. Phantom Night Veil is a god tier skill in this game, as the AoE ticks it emits staggers almost every enemy, including bosses, letting you extend your combo even further by interrupting their animations. Scalpel embodies everything great about the parry slop of Khazan, as proper timing can shut him down completely, but his swings are hard to nail the window for because of their varied speeds. Out of every boss, I'd say he's the most satisfying to completely body. Yeah. As already established, I hate zoners, but do you know what I also hate? Rapiers. So obviously I was quite upset upon learning that Princess Ilena is both a zoner and a rapist. Her rapier attacks are very hard to read, but the LB plus Y parry is super effective against her if you can manage to land it consistently. Trying to rhythm game through her rapid attack chains is an option, but I'd rather shut her up before she whips it out. When she enters her zoner phase, you have to wait for her to cast these purple balls, then carefully approach through her remaining projectiles.
It's been a while, old friend.
A motherfucking dragon!
This game was not made for giant enemies. The camera doesn't do this fight any favors, but Hismar fundamentally is very boring. His combos are simple and the breath attacks don't pose any sort of real threat. You wait for his head to go near the ground, smack it, maybe aim for a horn break if you want, block his claws, block his dive, except this dive, dodge this, and I guess you can dodge this one too. When people complain about parry slop, this is probably what they mean. He deals a lot of damage, so starting out he will hurt, but once you realize how simple he is, you will rock his shit. I am not trying to come across like a mega elitist, everything is too easy for me gamer. You've already seen me get bodied multiple times by now. Hismar may deal big damage, but your brain will quickly figure out his patterns. That's kind of what it was made for. Almost every other boss you fought on the way here was more difficult than Hismar. You were well above this gay-ass chud barker. Despite my slandering, Hismar does have a use for us. His armor set. Thank you for taking us this far chaos-ridden, but it's time to move on. I spent a few minutes farming Hismar's skin to fashion into a fursuit. Scale suit. The Flesh Ripper set provides all of these buffs to charge attacks, which is great already, but the skill, Apex Limit, is where the source is at. I upgrade the sword and unlock another skill, Thanatos Wave, which boosts the damage of Phantom Night Veil's AoE pulse. This thing costs much less fury than our previous skill, Volcanic Wrath, and by properly chaining our attacks, we can push it to new heights. First, I use Inner Fury to speed up my charge attack times, Phantom Night Veil to trigger the AoE, then hold Y. I don't think you need me to tell you that this setup deals stupid damage. While health bars aren't visible, watching everything spontaneously explode into a pillar of gore gets the point across just fine.
Join us, Khazan.
Reese.
Reese hits hard and has a decent amount of health for a caster. Obviously, this is another scenario where we have to dodge her projectiles and guard against melee. Once you reach her second phase, her projectiles are almost identical to before but slightly faster. What you need to be wary of are her new melee attacks. Thankfully, weapons can be parried. By relying on a scythe, she has set her ass up for getting countered. However, her stamina damage is absurd. For the first time ever, this game finally made me use an item that wasn't healing or status cleanse. These orbs boost your stamina regen, which will be useful to offset her exhaustion and just letting us play more offensively in general. Despite the slow pacing of the fight, Reese is kinda sweaty, and getting hit by her magic just once can really set you back. Overall, still one of the easier bosses to learn. Like Hismar, she isn't very complex. I've spent this whole time yapping about bosses, but what happens in that space between one boss to the next? These are rather typical Souls-like exploration stages, with fun enemies sprinkled throughout and hidden collectibles. That also means there's a fair share of spiteful encounters and jump scares. A lot of them. You will get used to it very quickly. One undeniable fact about Khazan is that it puts combat first. Enemy movesets are fun and interesting, but combat itself has very little interaction with the environment. You can dive onto enemies for an AoE explosion, as long as there isn't a railing blocking you, but it's not like your weapon can bounce off surfaces, nor can you or enemies be bumped into walls for a stagger. There isn't a jump button either, leading to situations where debris you could easily clamber over theoretically isn't possible due to game limitations. Locked doors and gates will halt the mighty General Khazan in his tracks. I understand that this is to give structure to the level, it's just not done in a very immersive way, which will probably bother quite a few people. You can knock enemies into the abyss, but you can't pick up breakable objects like barrels and use them in combat. Combat and the environment are very loosely connected. There are some basic interactions, but for the most part they run parallel to each other. The story and gameplay disconnect is also very strong. The great hero Khazan, defender of the people, can just run up to a random dude and smack him into a fine red mist with no consequences. For a lot of people, oversights like this are a massive turn-off, which is completely understandable. I don't care deep down, but it's something I try to keep in mind. If you want an immersive adventure role-playing experience, no. If you want a difficult action game, then hello, welcome. But what about the Souls-like mechanics? The checkpoint system is pretty forgiving, with lots of them spread throughout the level, so when you die, you generally won't have to worry about losing your souls, especially with the item that lets you retrieve them not being all that rare. Backtracking upon death obviously exists, but the ability to run past nearly every enemy in the game makes this a relatively minor conflict. Tough enemies are what makes the game hard, not punishing level design. The combat and build system is so far removed from anything Dark Souls related that it's only the mechanics outside of it that retain any semblance. The combat is undoubtedly closer to Neo than Dark Souls. I've even heard some people call Khazan a Neo-like. No idea if that's a proper term, but it is an accurate descriptor. What I'm trying to say is, Khazan did not need to be a Souls-like, but I don't think it being one hurts the game in particular. It is simply there. Ozma, at least in my opinion, manages to be a final boss that is actually the hardest fight in the game. That goes to show that the bosses are quite well designed overall. When aiming for the true ending, Ozma has 3 phases with no breaks or stock-ups in between. It's time to get good. Khazan parries the heat death of the universe and smacks Ozma while he's vulnerable. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This guy is really challenging on hardcore mode. You're at the end of a difficult journey, and Ozma is the final roadblock. The hardest obstacle you will face in the whole game. I got frustrated, I grumbled profanities, but I never gave up. Stamina damage is your greatest threat on hardcore, and Ozma pushes that to the extreme. You get hit a few times, have fun being exhausted. But after fighting his first phase over and over again, it clicked. But in the second phase, Khazan loses his shirt. And Ozma changes his entire moveset. Reflection is your god, interrupting those long, annoying combos and applying massive stamina damage. Phase 3, I was merely getting by on raw instinct. What surprised me most is that Ozma's theme in the actual Dungeon Fighter Online absolutely mogs his theme from Khazan, to the point that I don't know why they didn't just reuse it. But don't worry, through the power of editing, I can fix this. and that was the first Berserker Khazan, a pretty god-tier parry-slop greatsword simulator. Not only that, a very rewarding and satisfying challenge overall. I had the stupidest grin on my face after beating Ozma. Even though I had already defeated him on expert during my first playthrough, hardcore mode did a great job inverting my uterus. Thank you, random commenter who suggested this game to me, by the way, you know who you are. The more I play, the more I sense the immense height of the skill ceiling. But for now, I will take my 100% achievements and complete hardcore run and call it for now. I am satisfied and ready to move on.